and welcome. In this on-demand video, OJM Group partner David Mandell discusses 4 tools physicians can use to protect their home and home equity from liability threats. If you have more questions or want to learn how to incorporate these tools into your financial strategy, click the link below to schedule a complimentary one-on-one consultation with one of our experienced team members.
Hello, I'm David Mandell, principal of the OJM Group. And what I'm speaking about today is how to protect your home and home equity from liability. So let's jump in. Well, since I've been helping physicians with asset protection planning, which is kind of the main subject of which this falls into, for years, for 2 decades, wrote a book called The Doctor's Asset Protection Guide in the late 90s. So that's almost 25 years ago. And from the beginning, as I helped physicians as an attorney and now part of OJM Group, a wealth management firm, shielding the home has always been a concern. Number one, it's on the balance sheet of most doctors. It is one of the most valuable assets, if not the most valuable, along with retirement accounts, perhaps, and investments. But even psychologically, it's even perhaps more important than some of these other assets because it's where you live and it's your home and your family's there. So you want to, sleep at night and think and have a good confidence that your home and home equity is well protected. But this is especially true here in 2021 as home values have skyrocketed in much of the country. Where I live in South Florida, that's undoubtedly true. Getting random texts, people wanting to buy my home, even though it's not on the market. And many of you have probably experienced something like that. So that's created some good problems to have, but from an asset protection point of view, a challenge. One is there's more equity needing protection, meaning it might be X plus 10%, 20%, 30%, maybe more. So you thought you may have been well protected a couple of years ago. Now the value's there. We need to do something else. The home value as a percentage of net worth has risen. Now, certainly other assets, we have plenty of folks from our team who speak on videos here on more market-related public securities, et cetera, and certainly we've done a great job for our clients. So those assets have grown too, but real estate may, for many of you, grown as a percentage of your net worth. And in certain states, as we'll talk about in a minute here, with homestead protections, in many states, those are tied to some fixed limit that might go up every year under the legislation, but there's a value of home equity that is protected. And for many clients that now may have exceeded that, or the excess is even more so today. They say, well, I'm a couple $100,000 close to the homestead, but now you're $500,000 in equity above the homestead, and now you want to think about doing something. So it's always been a concern of docs to protect the home, but I think in 2021, it's become even more important why I'm covering it today. Now, when we talk about protecting the home, we have to talk about both inside risks and outside risks. Now, I'm going to deal with inside risks very quickly because it's probably something that's not as likely to be a concern for many of you. And inside risks are risks that are created by or at the home itself. So slip and falls, if you have a pool like we have in South Florida, someone getting injured in the pool, if you have kids over, if you have guests who drink and then get into an accident, that liability may come back to you as the host, especially those of you who have teenage or college age kids who are home and drinking. So there's certainly potential liability. As an attorney, I can think of lots of different examples of that. And it's probably low likelihood to go anywhere for many clients, but very high potential liability. You can imagine if somebody gets seriously hurt or on the property or because of the property, they have liability. Now, what's the main solution for inside risks is insurance. Okay. And as opposed to when I practiced law at a very good law firm in New York City on Park Avenue, and we formed OJM Group, 14 years ago, I really wanted to make sure that part of asset protection was looking at property and casualty insurances like homeowners, like auto, like umbrella, which many physicians don't have or don't have it adequately. Because again, for most of these types of risks, the best insurance and the only way really to protect against those risks is insurance. And typically, especially with umbrella, you can get very good coverage inexpensively. So it is an absolute important part of asset protection planning And there's a lot of law firms and lawyers who don't even look at that because they see it as a different specialty. I look at it from a wealth protection point of view. It goes hand in hand with legal tools and other things, as you know, if you read any of our books or watched our other asset protection videos. So again, make sure you have good insurance, and that'll cover you on the inside risks. Now, for most of you, when you probably clicked on this or you were thinking about protecting the home or its equity, what you think about is outside risk, which is not a liability that's created by the property or at the property, but personal liability that when someone gets a judgment against you, can then go after the equity in that property and perhaps should even sell your home and take the proceeds. And what are these risks? Well, medical malpractice, something you deal with every day, contractual liability, personal guarantees. I do a podcast, not on UMedi, but on our website, Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast. And I was just interviewing a very successful retina surgeon about this, and he was telling some horror stories about personal guarantees and how that turned into liability, car accidents, et cetera. So anything that could threaten you personally from a liability, from a litigation point of view, if someone had a judgment, could they take the home? Could they make a forced sale of the home and get the equity? Well, we're going to look at 4 tools to protect against that. And number 1 is homestead. Now, homestead laws vary significantly by state. So for some of you, it may be all you need. For some of you, it may not provide anything. They range, it's state law, and the highest level of protection is a state exemption because everybody knows what it is and it can't be, the asset can't be touched, or at least that level of equity is immune. And that's what we call +5. And we have a -5 to +5 sliding scale. Make sure you get our books or watch our videos to understand that. But the states range from 0, let's say in New Jersey, and others, to unlimited in value, like where I live in Florida, Texas, a number of other states. So again, it's really state by state. For some of you docs, homestead will be all you need. For many of you, it'll be, well, this doesn't really get us there. We got to look at the next couple of tools. Some states allow a married couple to stack exemptions. So I can think of Ohio that has an exemption in the couple 100,000 range, but if you're married, you can stack 2 on top of it and get double the exemption. Some states have certain filing requirements. So you want to make sure that you qualify. So what's the pro and con here? They're free. You get it by owning a primary residence in that state, but there's total variability. So for some of you, great. For some of you, useless. Make sure you understand your state's protection and do what's needed to qualify for whatever the exemption is that you have. So for some of you, again, homestead, all you need. For most of you, you will need more than that or something other than that. Now, for about 20 states, tenancy by the entirety is a legal form, a co-ownership form of a married couple that I call a quasi-exemption, because what it really does in the states that have it and respect it for real estate, they offer the protection that it is unlimited against a claim against one spouse. So I could have $1 billion judgment against me. As long as my spouse is not involved, they cannot touch my tenancy by the entirety home. Okay. Now that happens to be true in Florida where I live, and I happen to have my personal residency owned by tenancy by the entirety. The deed has that right in it, but that's not true of all states. So again, it's +5 protection, that exemption, against claims against one spouse, but no protection whatsoever against claims against both spouses. So if in my example, my spouse and I were both sued, they could touch that property. They could take it. There's no protection at all. You can imagine it's only valid while there's a marriage in place. So if you get divorced and there's still that creditor out there with a judgment, now all of a sudden they can detach it, or if one of the spouses dies, et cetera. So again, pro and con, it's free. Okay. In some states, you need to have, there may be a little legal work that's involved to change the deed, but there are limitations. Okay. If your main concern is a claim just against you, and you're in a state that's tenancy by the entirety, could be a very good option for you. Again, make sure you understand your state's, whether it offers TBE or not, and what protections it offers, and what you might need in terms of the deed to qualify. Okay. When we bought our most recent house, we made sure that we worked with the attorney to close, and the deed had the right language for tenancy by the entirety. In some states, you need that. In some, it's a presumption if you're married. So you want to make sure you get the right advice there. And again, so for some of you, homestead's all you're going to need. For some of you, tenancy by the entirety may be, given other options, your best tool, especially if you're not, you're mostly concerned, I should say, with claims against one spouse. Now let's go into a legal tool, or a type of legal tool that might work for some of you. And that is tool number 3 against outright risk: trusts. Okay. Now, irrevocable trusts are solid options to protect assets in general, including the home. We're going to talk about 2 types. Now, I really want to make this clear because a lot of folks don't really realize the difference between irrevocable and revocable trusts. Again, get our books. But many of you may, in many states, own your home in your trust, your family trust, and you think, well, that provides protection. In general, the vast majority, it's not. Why? Because that trust is going to be a family trust, as you call it, but it's, from a legal point of view, it's a revocable trust, okay? Which is great for estate planning. And you want it to be revocable because you want to be able to change that trust, revoke it, change it, amend it, replace it, just like you would a will. You don't want something locked in for the rest of your life, okay? So it's very good for estate planning, for incapacitation planning, but it doesn't provide any asset protection while you're alive, okay? So if it's a revocable, no protection; irrevocable, protection. So what are 2 types of irrevocable trusts that might work for many of you in terms of protecting the home or its equity? Well, the first one's called a QPERT, a Qualified Personal Residence Trust. And this is useful in all states. It really is a federal estate planning tool. You make an irrevocable gift, can't be changed, of the home into the trust for the trust beneficiaries, which could be children or grandchildren, et cetera. After a term of years, and again, it's written into the trust and there's a bunch of tax rules to it, that's going to affect your gift tax and your state tax benefits. But after a term of years, you're going to have to pay rent to the trust because the trust owns it and you're still living there. You may get may want to live there till you die, and you pay rent to that, okay? Part of the plan. Now, it's protected once it goes into the trust, assuming no fraudulent transfer, meaning there's nothing out there while you make the transfer. In terms of timing, and it's out of your taxable state. And that's where most QPERT planning comes from, is estate planning, state tax planning. And if we have an estate tax change law, gift tax change this year in 2021, this is going to be even more popular than it has been. But again, for some of you, probably skewing older docs, this could be a very good tool for you if you want estate planning and asset protection. Okay. If you're only looking for asset protection, maybe one of the other tools will be better because you're really giving this home away and all of its equity, yes, to family members who are beneficiaries, but still, if it's part of your plan to sell that home and downsize and use that equity in your retirement plan, QPERT probably not the best tool, okay, but something to look into. Now, the other type of tool allows you to have your cake and eat it too, because you can protect it, but also between you and your spouse both have access to it if you end up selling it and pulling the equity out in the future, buying another property. And that's called a domestic asset protection trust. And I've mentioned this in other many videos, again, certainly in our book. And this is what we used to have to go offshore to do in the beginning of my career in the 1990s. But 20 states now authorize this type of trust that allows you to create a trust, be a beneficiary, meaning have access to those assets when the coast is clear. But if anybody's ever suing you, has a judgment against you, they put in clauses that you're under duress. You can't get to it. They can't get to it. Spouse potentially can get to it. So you can have your cake and eat it too, in that when the coast is clear, you can get to it. And if the coast isn't clear, it's protected. Okay. Now, only about 20 states offer this. Okay. And if you are in one of those states, as an example, I work very closely with an attorney who wrote the DAPT legislation in Ohio. And I know for clients in Ohio who have valuable homes, one of the things that they look at pretty seriously is using a DAPT for the home, because you can have this flexibility with your cake and eat it too, but it also total protection. It makes a very good fit. So again, in both the QPERT and the DAPT, you have to work with an attorney well-versed in these trusts. Because there's a lot of bells and whistles and kind of landmines if you don't know what you're doing, and there's plenty of attorneys who do. The DAPT is certainly a little more rare than the QPERT, only because some of the states Like I know Connecticut off the top of my head have only adopted the DAPT in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not as if the QPIRT's been around for decades. So make sure you're finding you work with the right people there. But again, for some of you, the DAPT may make a lot of sense. And for clients in any state, QPIRT could make sense, especially if you have estate planning benefits as well. Fourth tool, final tool that we'll talk about on the outside risks, ways to protect the home. Again, first 3 tools were homestead, tenancy by the entirety, and then the trust. Number 4, debt shield. Well, what does debt shield mean? Debt shield, or another fancy word, collateralization, really means putting debt on the home, enough to get that equity to a close to protected position. Now, let's use an example. Let's just say you have $1 million home and the homestead in your state is $200,000. Okay. Well, if you have $1 million home and an $800,000 mortgage on it, then you only have $2,000 of equity, and that $200,000 homestead is going to protect you. Well, let's say you had $500,000 of debt, so you had $500,000 of equity. Well, that's a fair amount higher than the 200. What if you got a home equity line of credit and draw down on it? What if you got a second mortgage and pulled that, increased your debt up to say 750? Okay, and now you'll have 250 of exposed equity, but the homestead protects 200,000. That's pretty good. It's not exact, but it's pretty good. Going to get you almost there. We like that. Now, if you're in that position, would you go from 500,000 in debt to 750? Well, the economics must make sense, right? I mean, certainly if client is asset protection is number 1 in their wealth planning concerns when we work with them at OJM, then we're going to bring this up and they may say, you know what, I want to do this. I can't say even if the economics don't make sense, because I'm trying to make them make sense. But even if it costs me something reasonable, I still want to do this because I want to sleep at night and have my home protected. Okay. Other clients may say, listen, I'm not that concerned about it. I'll do it, but only if it makes economic sense, i.e. I can make money on it. So that's with our other people in our firm. My area specialty is asset protection. My background's a lawyer, obviously. We have plenty of CFPs and financial folks. And what they're going to look at is the after-tax cost of that interest, because for many of you, you'll be able to write off some of that loan. And what are you going to do with the proceeds? Now, certainly in the last couple of years, and certainly as we sit here in 2021, there's almost never been a better time to do this. And I've talked about this on other podcasts and other videos, which is, you can get fixed rates on mortgages extremely low, much lower than what the markets or even a conservative portfolio has returned. So in many times, again, what you want to do is look at the after-tax cost of the interest and compare it to a conservative portfolio designed to match or exceed that interest. And this is the use of leverage. And this is something that a lot of sophisticated people do, and many physicians do it. There are some who are just so debt adverse that they can't think about it. But I would give them a perspective here that in this case, the debt is your friend, because you're not borrowing the money and spending it. You're borrowing and putting it somewhere else on your balance sheet so you can always pay it off. That's really the key. And the proceeds must protect it from an asset protection point of view. To borrow the money to get more, say, debt and less equity in your home, and then just keep that in your name, that doesn't do any good, right? Because now you've just borrowed it out and put it in another place that's actually more liquid, but just as exposed. So oftentimes folks are doing this in conjunction with a limited liability company or one of the trusts, or maybe a tenancy by the entirety account if they have it, but not for the home. Some other protected position, an exempt life insurance policy or annuity, something. And maybe they can even do it and capitalize a company and be able to get some tax deductions with a qualified plan. Lots of different ways to go with that. But the point is, you have to end up using those proceeds, not only economically, so it makes sense, but also you got to protect those proceeds. Otherwise, you haven't accomplished anything from a protection point of view. Pro and con, it can make great economic sense or not, right? You borrow the money and just go spend it, on a vacation. Well, that didn't really, might have been fun, but it didn't help you with your financial goals. So got to make economic sense, got to be well protected, and you want to work with your financial quarterback to evaluate the options. And with that, we've got the 4 tools. Again, homestead, tenancy by the entirety, trusts, and then debt shields. Hopefully this was helpful, and it gave you some interest or at least exposure to ideas of how to better protect your home, which I think for most of you has probably gone up in value, and your home equity. Thank you for listening.
OJM is a multidisciplinary wealth management firm. For nearly 2 decades, our firm has helped physicians across the U.S. reduce taxes, protect assets, and achieve their financial goals. OJM Group offers viewers a complimentary consultation where we can answer your questions to see if our firm might be a good fit for your situation. Simply click the button below to schedule your free consultation. We hope to speak with you soon. Thanks for watching.